So we can start off with our usual prayer for student and teacher. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cower with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. And we could also add, may there be many questions. So this is a question-answer session. We have a participant here who has a question, but before we attend to that, maybe we can open the floor, pause a little bit, and bring up a question. Now, a question can be any question about the Vedantic principles. It can be any question to do with spiritual life. It could be any question to do with life in general and how we are coping with it. So these questions all have sometimes a physical, sometimes a psychological, emotional, but invariably the solution or all of these leads to the spiritual question. Because spirituality is our foundation. We are foundationally pure spirit. And this fact really, once we go to this, what do I call blissful base, we find many of these other problems disintegrate. Just as if we go to the root of the tree, we've understood the tree itself. Or just as any building that has 40, 50 stories high would have to have a strong foundation without which all the others go wrong. If we're guiding children to build some structure with building blocks, the very favorite occupation of small children, how high can we put blocks without them falling? But if there's a slight kink on the way, if things are not exactly square, then there's less stability. And if you really want the tower to be strong, then you make 4 of the blocks at the base and go up from there. There's no guarantee that it won't fall, but at least you have a greater chance of stability. So I'm going to mute the mic while we advance some questions.
I wanted to ask Swamiji, in the Vedanta framework, how do we use the Vedantic principles to get rid of addiction to sense pleasures, whether that's smoking, alcohol, food? This is my question.
Okay, thank you for that. So there was a passage that I dealt with yesterday from Raja Yoga, and it's a foundational passage that tells us that we have to, first of all, we have to view the mind as a kind of plastic, flexible thing, not as a fixed thing. Now, we all know that the mind is not a fixed thing. We can all observe how people change their mind, is the expression. We can all observe how there is a field, if you like, that we can observe in front of us where waves operate. What do we mean by waves? It means mental events, internal events, where we can see an origin, a start, we can see a progression, we can see maybe an apex of it, and we can see a diminishing of it, and a disappearance of it, and a replacement with another one. The reason why we can observe these is because we have the faculty of time. Our perception is that things come in a kind of train called time. And the first train we can attribute to, let's just call it a unit, maybe like a second. It comes so quickly that we think it's a continuum. When we actually slow it down, such as techniques of introspection, meditation, we can see what's happening in the mind. The slowed down picture is not what we see as a continuum. We can see it as a series of individual pictures that come second by second, run as a continuum, it looks like a movie. But a movie, when you slow it down, is just a series of sequential pictures. And as I've said many times before, as a child, you can make stick figures. One leg is like this, next picture, leg is a little different, next picture, a little. You run it at a faster rate. It looks like a man running. This is how they make cartoons. They make cartoons by making individual pictures and running it in sequence. So addiction is a very strong term, because what it really means is that a number of these pictures have been run in a reaction, as a reaction to how we interpret the world in front of us and how we cope with it. Let's take the most obvious, strongest addictions. Addiction to smoking, for example. I always say, you see, I only smoke when I'm on fire. If I'm not on fire, then there's no smoking taking place. And if I am on fire, maybe some desperate blowing is in place. But we all have some kind of addiction, although we might not register in such strong terms. And so this is our coping mechanism. When we are very small, everybody else is very tall. When we are faced with a world that seems to challenge us, when we think that the world is some kind of struggle, when we become compatible with our natural biology that says that life is a struggle, life is a competition. This is called natural selection. The key component to Darwin's natural selection will be that we think that it is all competition and struggle, as survival of the fittest. But this doesn't apply in adulthood. Imagine if we applied this in terms of the propagation of the human species, that to generate a successful species, we have to take the strongest. So two people get married on their wedding night. They go to the hotel room. They plunge toward each other vigorously. They bite and fight and scratch and mate, and a super child is born. This is not part of human nature. This is not how human nature works. And if we rate it like this, then the most admired and enduring personalities and characters in history will be complete failures. Let us take Buddha, for example. He was a monk. He never married. As far as we know, he managed to control his food. He was full of compassion, and therein lies the difference. Because the Buddha, after 500 births or so, became this enlightened one, according to his own reckoning. But how is it that he was not tempted? Well, he was tempted. We have accounts of his enlightenment process, sitting down on a bow tree, and a tree of enlightenment. He sits there, and during his meditation process, Mara visits him. Mara, the embodiment of temptation. See, 500 years later, we find Jesus sitting in the desert, and the adversary comes, the one who is there to tempt him. It's not that there was some external thing. We're all dealing with aspects of the mind. As we sit and as we go about our daily basis, doubts will come, fears will come, temptations will come. And they're all essentially, well, at least one of them would be biologically based. What is a desire? A desire comes to us because we have made a connection with something that we view as pleasurable. And we think that this will solve our problems temporarily, or maybe we don't even think permanently. We know if we analyze it properly, it's not going to be a permanent formula. But maybe for the time being, we can escape. And that means that this indulgence will be a form of escapism, just a temporary relief. No doubt it's highly pleasurable. No doubt our understanding of its pleasure is because We did it in the past, and it's now entrenched in our psyche. What part of the psyche? The unconscious mind. We have to bear in mind that according to the yogic geography of the mind, there's also the Sankhya geography of the mind. There are three types, three states in which the mind can operate. One is the unconscious mind, some people call subconscious mind. They're a little misleading because it's not subordinate to anything. It is simply a collection of all our behaviors. And if we take our evolutionary biology seriously, every cell is evidence and accumulation of these biological behaviors. From the time of an amoeba or even a bacteria, we have learned how to cooperate with other things. We have learned how to extract what we want. We have learned to convert what we want in order to survive. Now, from a philosophical point of view, why should we want to survive? Natural selection will tell us we want to survive. We want to exist. Well, why should we? Why should it be like that? There's no explanation from biology why natural selection should take place, unless you introduce something like randomness. We are here. Why? Because we are here. No other reason. There's no purpose in it. But that goes against our observation, because our observation shows that there are small changes that can be registered. Even the fossil record will show a number of series of changes. And that tells us that we're headed for a direction. Surely any sensible person will tell it. But Neo-Darwinism will deny it. It wants, being essentially a material reductionist philosophy, it will naturally tell us, no, there's no purpose, it's just random. And random selection is there, random mutation is there. But we know from a careful study of the cellular structure that actually there is randomness within the structure, there is variation within the structure. It's called stoicism within the structure, but the cell knows how to deal with it. Absolutely. And rallies all its forces mysteriously around to deal with it. This is the new biology. The old biology is outdated, 1970s. The new biology shows us that there's a very complex series of interchangeable and intercommunicative signals designed to assist the cell to survive. Now, when we go into the philosophy of it, when I say philosophy of it, I don't mean some intellectual gymnastic version of it. I mean when we start seriously going inwards, going on an inward journey with a desire to find out what is the truth of our own being, never mind about anything else. We come to a conclusion that there is a fundamental, quintessential entity that is pure existence itself. It never comes, it never goes. The whole of the Upanishads are occupied with this subject. It is eternal, it is infinite, it has no time boundaries, it has no particular restrictions in space. And this area is an area that we can call freedom. Now, the language is only convenience language, because freedom and area, these two terms don't go together. If there's an area, it's no longer free. So let's use it anyway as a convenience term. Some dimension, some area within you that is completely free. No boundaries, there's no spatial awareness about it, no temporal use about it. It's completely free. We can't even imagine what that feels like or looks like. We can know what it feels like to some extent. We know what gender freedom looks like. We know what national freedom looks like. There are many, many struggles. In France, probably there have been three great revolutions, maybe engendering something like a revolutionary nature within the people. But it is all because inherently we desire freedom. We don't want to be in prison. This is why prison is a deterrent. To restrict somebody's freedom is a great punishment. And yet our freedom is restricted because we're operating within constraints. It is fortunate for us that we're operating within constraints. But what it means is then that we have to be able to use this free area, as it were, to assert this level of freedom in order to properly decide what is good for us, what is not good for us. And then addictions have none of this discernment. Technically, we can call this viveka, this discernment, which we have to constantly apply. And in doing this, we are training the mind. What do we mean by training the mind? We are reforming the unconscious level, which is simply a whole series of habits that we have inculcated. And the more we inculcate this habitual behavior, the more we repeat it, the more we unconsciously practice it, then the more the addiction becomes entrenched. And the more the addiction becomes entrenched, the more our freedom becomes restricted. This area of freedom can be an area for expression. In unguarded moments, we can catch it. In unguarded moments, it comes to us with its inherent wisdom, and it's not emotional. So the source of addiction will be an emotional basis. How can we create some emotional formula that will deal with reactions that are emotional as a response to the so-called difficulties in life? In short, the only way to deal with an addiction is to create another addiction. The only way to treat a negative, and when I say negative, it means something, some behavioral characteristic that is damaging to ourselves and damaging to everybody else and everything around us, all-inclusively damaging. And what we mean by that is all-inclusively weakening. Addictions are weakening. They're not strengthening. So this morning, somebody told me of a beautiful thought. The thought was, as far as I can recall, that give me the strength. Give me the strength to live or to accept the things I cannot change. Give me the strength to assert my capacity to change the things I can change. And the ultimate conclusion would be that may I assert my capacity to change and take charge of my life. Now, taking charge of a car is a non-brainer. We know how to do it. But let's look at the steps, because the steps are the same steps as controlling the mind. First of all, we have to assess what are the limitations of our instrument that we're using. Secondly, we have to get used to manipulating the useful aspects of it so that we can usefully get from A to B. Then we have to know also the engineering side of it, not in any great detail necessarily. A child knows switching a light on will work, knows how to do it. At a very young age, takes great delight. Let me turn the light on. Yeah, oh, light comes on. Let me turn it off. Oh, they don't know. It's all a mystery. Only later they may discover about the electrical connection. And there are some adults who are not even aware of how that works, particularly in the age of technology, the age of media, the age of computers, and so on. A small child will teach me very, very easily how to operate things which I find extremely complex because of a generation gap, not being used to the technology, not being in the habit of developing it, or being functionally compatible with it. But children are brought up today, and it's second nature to them. Now, personality, the whole of personality, Swami Vivekananda points out in his Raja Yoga commentaries, that the whole of our personality is simply a collection of habits. This is useful to us because habits can then be changed by developing counter habits. We talk to ourselves incessantly. And in talking to ourselves, this creates habits. You wake up in the morning, there may be nobody there, but you will find yourself talking to yourself. When brushing the teeth or something like that, seemingly harmless activity where there's not much brain power required. And because no charge is taken of your thoughts will come to you. Now, some thoughts will come to you from that unconscious area, which is to do with negative habits. But other thoughts will be freer than that. Other thoughts will be with this understanding. May thoughts come to me. This is a prayer from the Rig Veda. May noble thoughts come to me from all sides is a prayer. It's an attitude of openness. May useful thoughts come to me. May I be something like a recipient of this area of freedom, and then see and register how this comes to me and recognize its divine origin, its inspiration, its flow of grace. What we call thought is divine grace flowing. How we use it, that's different. How we use it, we can use it for positivity or we can use it against us. And the interesting thing is that in using it against us, we're not registering the fact that it is damaging to us, the fact that it is some kind of enemy against us. And this is where our discrimination has to take place. Counter habits is the only way. Counter habits should be habits that have no obstacles within them. The greatest obstacle we have is egocentricity. Standing in a certain position, thinking that the whole of the world is different from us, is separate from us, that we have to make a struggle against it, that we have to deal with it from an individual, independent way. And what I would encourage you to do, at least from time to time, is sit where God sits, stand where God stands, and see how the universe looks. And you'll find that the kind of behavior that ensues will be a beaming. The spirit of generosity will beam forth. If we say that God is love and we sit on God's throne and beam love, how will it look? Now, there are many difficult situations, seemingly difficult situations. I'm thinking of a particular place where a family, an organization that considers itself as a family dedicated to the service of humanity, forgot its cause and divided itself into 4 or 5 different factions. Now, in a family may argue, but there is always one thing that cements the relationship: love. I accept you as you are. I'm not going to criticize you. See what a useful thing the words of the Holy Mother are. We put it into an Irish context with a certain rhyme, in response to somebody who said, this Mother's Prayer that we standardly now in many Western centers use before a meal. Can you put it into some kind of rhyme so we can remember it easily? So yes, those who know it, they can even repeat it with me, see? So within it, we find, let us not accuse, demand or complain, but love, respect, and help, not blame. No fault to find except our own. Make every stranger feel at home. And let our hearts to all be shown to make the world wholly our own. This is an extract from this prayer. These are words that divine consort of Sri Ramakrishna, that we call Holy Mother, repeated. Very memorable words. These are words of a mother. We have to understand today is Mother's Day. So this is from the heart of a universal mother who says these words. That we can say these loving words that have no element of criticism within it. A great, great formula that is put there as a means to assist concentration is put there by Patanjali in Patanjali Yoga Sutras. He tells us, Maitri, be friendly to all. Now, all means all. There's no judgment or criticism in it. You have a friendliness of every to all. If we sit where that divine sits, will we not be friendly to all? These are all my children. Why would I be unfriendly to anyone? There's only awkward theology that says that God loves you. However, if you don't conform to the law and what have you, then we'll put you in a pit of fiery hell where you'll scream and cry and be tortured. But I love you, you can't have that. That's not compatible. And so there is a kind of motivational structure that has been introduced in theology, which urges people to do the right moral thing. But at the end of the day, it has no real deep value to us because it's contradictory. Love has no boundaries. One of the greatest summary statements of the definition of love is given by St. Paul in his letters. That it has, and it's repeated. Actually, I think it's repeated at every Christian, if I'm not mistaken, if not every, but every, certainly most marriage ceremonies in Christendom. These words of St. Paul, that love is generous, love is giving, love is kind, and all of these things. There's no judgment within it. So we lose this sense of love when we become egocentric. And all this activity of egocentricity is toxic poison to ourselves and to every other person and place and environment around us, and is characterized by these two things, what we call rajas and tamas. And these two ways of behavior, and I've mentioned these before, but if you're not familiar with them, rajas is that psychological quantity, emotional quality within us that is a driving force for our own self-interest, primarily. Most behavior is like that. Most human behavior is like that. Tamas is giving up on it. It's going in the opposite direction. It's saying, let me deal with things by blanking things off. Let me sleep forever. Let me be lazy. Let me give up. And part and parcel of that is, let me indulge myself in some sensual activity. And the repetition of that will create an addiction. The same thing, let me be a driving force, has the same component. Let me actively go out in order to entertain the senses. But sattva, the other element, the balancing element that provides an equilibrium to it, will start off with a judgment which understands and recognizes this is not helping me out with addictive behavior. It has no long-term solution. There may be a short-term relief, but long-term, it doesn't work. I have to find some different formula. I have to shift my thinking in some way so that I'm dealing with things differently. And this element is called sattva. The very term indicates a variety of flavors that help us to understand what it means. First of all, is truthfulness. Truthfulness means that there's the truth about my fundamental nature, the truth about the world makes me have a spirit of openness and generosity, engenders love and truth and all these other noble qualities. And an invitation toward that is in that prayer. Let noble thoughts come to me from all sides. Let me be open. So yesterday, if I didn't mention it here, I mentioned it to somebody who was sitting here, that yesterday I was looking in our garden and daffodils, a simple yellow flower. Supposing you think that this whole world is a symphony, as an orchestration of waves, then a daffodil can be seen as the trumpet section. And all of the heads are turned toward the setting sun. Sun is at a certain position in the sky in the west. And still sunlight is there, which means the energy is there, and daffodils are picking it up with no instruction manual of how to do this, and turning their heads automatically toward the sun. Every head was turned toward the sun, as if in worship, as if doing an arti, as if doing a Vesper service. What a wonderful thing. What is the intrinsic internal knowledge that enables that to happen? So the first thing in spiritual life is we have to be open-minded. Somebody told me I was open-minded once, but then my brains fell out. No, not like that, you see. It means we have to be all accepting. We have to have some internal shift away from our self-interest and say, let's park that on the side for one moment, at least for one moment, at least for a few moments. Let me take my self-interest and park it on one side. Let me start off with a blank sheet. Let me see how open I can be. Let me open all the faculties I have. And sometimes it requires a physical movement. Let me open my hands like this. This is a natural, these hands open, is a natural position for Jewish prayer, by the way. And Muslim prayer also, I think, has these kinds of movements. So let me be open. Let me open my heart. Let me be open-minded. Let me be a vessel that is prepared to be filled, knowing that a divine grace is continuously flowing, and I can catch some inspiration. This part of the mind is called the superconscious mind. To access the superconscious mind, I have to transcend both the conscious mind and I have to transcend the subconscious mind, or the unconscious mind. We cannot deal with habitual behavior directly. This I mentioned yesterday also. We have to do it through the conscious mind. That means consciously forming a different habit, inserting values of nobility, of truth, of goodness. All these are sattvic. And then ultimately, Patanjali Yoga Sutra says, having formed this counter habit, we now go a step further and we even transcend even this component of it. Even goodness and purity, even that we transcend. But both of these are necessary. How is it that we don't have any stability? Now, this was a question I asked, but ask the questioner to ask this and any other question that they have in the light of what I've just said, and also, in a separate way. So,
first question, Swamiji, I would ask is connected to that question. Swamiji, the way she asked about addiction, food and alcohol. So, can we have addiction to certain thoughts as well? Yeah. And then how do we resolve it actually if we do have it?
Addictions start with addiction to thoughts. But these thoughts are of an emotional type. They come from an emotional way of dealing with the world. So, for example, some disappointment came in life. And every disappointment have the same components as bereavements. You go through the same phases. We start with denial. How could this happen to me? Disappointment kicks in. But then the way of dealing with it is the way we habitually are used to dealing with it. And we probably have to go back to our childhood. How did we deal with it in childhood? Let us take the I can't believe it, see? And then we go on to blaming. And then we may go on to guilt. And then ultimately we may have anger about it. And unless we resolve these particular emotions at the very fundamental sound level, that is the level of reasoning, the level of the intellect, we'll be hooked up in the emotional addictions, which will lead us to the physical addictions. If you ask somebody, let us see, or if you explore drug addiction, or if you explore any of these substance abuse addictions, including food addiction, then you'll see it's because of some emotionally felt gap within us, some sense of incompleteness. And how do we complete it? We think we can complete it with food. Now, the advantage that the Enneagram has is we say how we are addicted to, or we are pulled towards certain desires, away from certain fears. So it is a kind of push-pull way of dealing with things. And it is repetitive. And as long as it is used in repetitively, we're not only not dealing with the addiction, we're entrenching it and deepening it. One of the biggest addictions here in Ireland would be addiction to alcohol. There's no doubt about it. And there's a growing addiction, of course, to drugs. And these are it's a social problem, there's no doubt. But then it's because at the fundamental level, there is no other substitute in evidence. And one of the great thrusts of our Vedantic movement is to show actually there is a final alternative to this. And the means toward that, and the means toward clarifying and clearing the mind, is to introduce better habits. And so in devotional language, assuming that most people are theistic devotees, not everybody is, but this is deemed by us to be an easier way, then all of our frustrations, all of our emotions, all of our feelings get transposed to this divine entity. And why would we do that? Not just as a technique, but because of a real appreciation and love. I mentioned daffodils, for example. There are so many daffodils now planted by the council here in Dublin. It's a campaign, and I was told yesterday to reduce the amount of lawn mowing that goes on because resources have been reduced. So there is a chance where daffodils become just part and parcel of so much normality that we don't even view it. We miss it, particularly if the mind is occupied by our own concerns. A tree, so what? A flower, so what? The sky, so what? A person, so what? A bus, so what? All these familiar things to us, we bypass. But there's an opportunity when we view that for a deep, deep appreciation that leads us to a blissful base, which is our own, this area of freedom. Because there's no such thing as an ordinary flower. There's no such thing as an ordinary scene. When we learn to see the extraordinary in it, then we start shifting something within us. And this shift enables us, when we repeat it, when we deepen it, it becomes now another means to express our emotion and to feel our emotion of a different type. Let's take, for example, the simple daffodil, the simple flower, so prolific now. I said if the life was a symphony, we could see that it is maybe the trumpet in the orchestral section. Because it's shaped in this way. You see, even a thought like that, and the fact that yellow is nature's colored choice of color. In the summer here, we don't get this in Zimbabwe. In summer here, all the summer flowers are predominantly of a yellow or red. There's a vibrant color to them. Of course, there are other colors as well. But in this country, I have noticed buttercups are yellow. If you go up into the mountains, the gorse is all yellow. The flowers are all yellow.
Yeah.
That means it's an echo of the sun's brightness. We can see how if nature is telling us, brighten up your mood, you see. Everything is bright. Everything is a reminder of sunshine. And even if we think that this is the trumpet section, the daffodil is the trumpet section, what kind of orchestra is it? And is everything playing in a symphonic way? Are there any notes of discord? See, at the fundamental level, everything is expression of one single vibration, unseen, untouched. Om iti Brahma, Om iti tam saram. Om is Brahman, says the Taittiriya Upanishad. See? Om is this all of this, trying to explain what is the significance of this original pranava, this initial movement. See? Apart from the fact that all prayers are begun with this, which this text mentions, with Om, all of these are mentioned. But you see, Om is all of this. All of this is Om. All of this is variations, modulations of this initial creative movement that we call Om. Then can we not enjoy the whole variety of the orchestra? As people know, I'm a great fan of Beethoven because he wasn't really interested in melodies. He was interested in seeds that could, from which melodies can develop with a few simple modes. Da 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 da. What's so special about da 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 da? See, a repetition of 3 notes. It's the same note actually to some people's ears. Da 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 da. You see, but from that comes a very famous symphony, you know, and everything is like that. Everything has the seed, but do we notice it? Now, when we notice it, it's a kind of meditation. We have to learn to trace everything back to its origin, not just intellectually, but with an inward understanding of wonder. What a wondrous thing it is, you know. And that leads to a sense of adoration and thankfulness. And all of this constitutes worship. Why should we love God? Because God is clearly lovable without any input from us, giving us this constant flow of thought, giving this constant flow of the capacity to empathically feel, giving this capacity for us to analyze, giving the capacity for us to appreciate, to notice things, giving us the capacity to engender this mother of all qualities that is love. That's why today is special, Mother's Day, for us anyway. In France, I think it's 29th of May. But you see, and in Malawi, in an African country, and I don't think it's today, it's some other day, Mother's Day is actually a national holiday. Yeah, wonderful thing. Because what can surpass a mother's love, really? Mother's love is all giving. So if we can see that the divine origin, the divine author, the divine dispenser of grace is pure love, and everything is the expression of it. But then you may say, okay, but what about the difficult areas? What about Russia and Ukraine? What about, these organizational difficulties where within an organizational family, they decided to put that value aside and replace it with criticism, rumors, mystery mongering, egoistic tendencies, putting people in a right or wrong camp, open to criticism. In contrast to that, you can see the mother's love. See, let us not accuse, let us not demand, let us not complain. Let us rather cooperate. And not only that, let us make the whole world our own. Let us not make an exclusive family. Let the whole world be our family. Simply from this act of sitting where God sits and beaming from there. What does it look like from there? Having that generosity of spirit. Now, this change of habit and this constancy within it is a constant game that has to be played. There's no holiday for it. But a game is something that's enjoyable. Because if we think it's a struggle, it becomes a negative. But if we take it as something that is delightful, using the current that we have, resources are here. Please take it, my child. How will you handle it? Let me handle it with joy and love. And yes, I may forget. And yes, I won't take it always like that. And yes, the old habits will kick in. All right, never mind. But we have the capacity to adjust it. Being a habit, we can change it. We can put a different habit in, a better habit in. So what is our freedom? What is salvation? The minimum requirements? Well, minimally, 51% of this sattvic element, 49% other things. We won't destroy the others completely because there's no such thing. This universe is constructed in such a way that it is like presenting ourselves with a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, a crossword puzzle, and gives us the opportunity, here, my child, I'm also giving you the capacity to figure it out. And I'm giving you capacity to enter deeply into the feeling aspect of life, taking all of this energy that we call love for objects, love for ourselves. Primarily, we're operating love for ourselves. That's the primary modus operandum. And when we get away from that and share that love generously with others, as love is shared to us by this divine element, then a whole transformation takes place. We look at things completely differently. When we rehearse that more and more, when we practice that more and more, it becomes a habit. It becomes a counter habit to any addiction. So I hope that makes all sense. I'm going to release the microphone now and see, manage to deal in my awkward way with this question.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You see, it requires constant reevaluation. It requires us to revalue how we normally interpret the world. And how we normally interpret the world is normally a wrong interpretation. It's not a useful interpretation. We have to learn to think of, look at things more creatively. If you take the world of art, the most prized art, whether it's painting, sculpture, is something that introduces something different and unique. It's not a copy. All the great, great works of art are unusual. At Le Louvre in France, in the museum there, there's of course the famous painting of Mona Lisa. And you line up and join a crowd, and it's only a small picture, but so famous. Why should it be so famous? Because it's unique. The landscape behind the figure is almost put in a very haphazard way, highlighting the central figure, and how you capture somebody's smile to be so intriguing and create so much speculation. What does it mean? That it becomes a unique work of art, and how it's painted in such a way with particular brush strokes, but how the artist's feeling gets inserted into the painting is the key to the work of art. Otherwise, anybody can draw anything, but without putting that, same thing with poetry, if you don't put your heart in the words, then it's just a bunch of words. If you don't put your heart in a song, well, it's just a bunch of notes. Anybody can do it. But what makes that particular thing? What exposes what we call the Shakti, this energy, which everybody understands and knows spontaneously, instinctively. This is something unusual. This is something that is creative. This is something that moves our own emotions. This all is as a result or a manifestation of divine grace, a section of creativity, if you will, that we have to tune into and employ. So make something different. When I give workshops and courses, one thing I say of a standard variety, I say, you don't have to agree with me. I don't expect you to agree with me, but at least please think differently. Have some different thought. Have something creative of your own. Tap into that source of uniqueness and individuality that becomes an expression. And when that expression is tapped into, we realize it's nothing to do with my individuality. It is to do with my openness to creativity. It is to do with me accessing this area, as it were, of freedom, this divine voice of infinite wisdom, which is always available to me. And when it doesn't flow naturally, it is because something's blocking it. Just as when water doesn't flow naturally, it is because something is in the way, an obstacle. We remove the obstacle and the flow comes. Like in your plumbing, you see, water's not flowing, some obstacle, pipes may be clogged or something. All right, we undo those. you put in some solvent that removes the accumulated rust or lime, the lime scale, and it flows on. So it's not that we have to do something extra. It's not that we have to put new water in. We have to remove what is the obstacle. Whole of spiritual life and the whole of evolution is to do with removing obstacles. You can view evolution, even biological evolution, like this. And this is Swami Vivekananda's unique understanding of this evolution. Actually, he's understanding the words of Patanjali in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So that if we can remove these kleshas or obstacles from us. So in the evolutionary process, when the mammal was removed, man jumped out, and when man was removed, God came out. Our evolution is really this manifestation of this divinity within coming. This is the meaning behind Swami Vivekananda's profound statement. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity from within. No more succinct or valuable summary statement can be made. So I see there's a hand up.
Yes, Swamiji. My question follows on from just your last few comments there about to think differently and creativity. And the question is, what if this creativity is not aligned with spirituality, but more aligned with materialism? Would following that creative impulse lead us further away into materialism? Or how would that be, or how should that be managed?
So I think it's important not to categorize things into things which are good, things which are bad, because actually creativity in itself is an area really that we have no direct control over. That's true creativity. Creativity in an artificial sense is not really tuning into the creative impulse. Creativity comes because it's a creator. So most religions will acknowledge, with the exception of, say, Buddhism, Jainism, and so on, will acknowledge that there is a creator. Even Buddhism will be aligned to that in the sense that a cosmic mind is also called Buddhi. What was Buddha? Buddha was the illumined, was called Buddha because one who has his intellect, his Buddhi, illumined. He becomes a Buddha, one of enlightened intellect. So the cosmic intellect which is there, that we otherwise call cosmic mind, cosmic Buddha, or the cosmic Christ, or cosmic Krishna, or whatever, or Hiranyagarbha, the golden womb, the golden seed, or Brahma, the creator. All our creativity is because there is an initial creative aspect within us, which is to do with the existence itself. So it has elements of discovery. So any truly creative process will actually be an expression of the divine. Any artificial creativity that is comprised of, you see, creativity is an opening response. True creativity is like that. You can have, for example, architects. I mean, when I look at some of the London skylight or some modern cities, their modern architecture, I don't find any aesthetic value in them at all. And creativity would have this aesthetic value. Inherently, a beauty would be in there. Now, there are some artists who will paint expressions of anger. There's one particular artist, I can't remember his name offhand, Francis Bacon, I think, is, not the 16th century version of it. So all his paintings are disturbing to me personally because their expression, no doubt there's a creativity, but the creativity is an expression of an emotion, an anger. And that anger is intrinsically materialistic because it is a response to the material world. It's an emotional response, which is intrinsically harmful and negative. There is a misunderstanding in modern psychology that if you have, for example, an issue of anger, then you should become angry as long as it doesn't harm anybody. There's no such thing. Because if you're angry, you're harming yourself first and foremost. Go out into the garden and angrily take away all the soil or punch a pillow and get it all out. Express your anger. Well, in spiritual life, we have a similar thing. If you're angry, be angry with God. Why don't you reveal yourself to me? And at least that kind of anger is energy orientated, at least in the right way. You know, Ravana gained his freedom because he was obsessed by thinking, even negatively, as Rama as his enemy. But at least he was thinking of God, even in angrily, you know. So it is a useful technique. The understanding is this: take all our emotion and steer it in a higher direction, and automatically will open up new avenues of thought and understanding, inner wisdom. Accessing inner wisdom. The ancient rishis who discovered the principles of the Vedas, that is, the principles of the truth that we now call Vedas, they went on initially an analytical process that created successive steps of opening, progressive openings, mystic openings, subtle discoveries, until ultimately the truth was revealed. Now, all of these were new. And the further they went and the deeper they went, the closer they came to cosmic mind, the original creative impulse of the universe. When I look at some of the architecture, I was going on that line and I forgot what he was saying. In some of the cities, these are not very, to my eye and to many people's eyes, these are unusual, no doubt creative in their way, but there's no aesthetic value in it. You know? So creating architecture just for the originality of creating something original and manipulating engineering in such a way that it becomes functional, that's one thing. But you can easily compare the aesthetic values of sheet glass and so on, which no doubt has some kind of aesthetic value, with the classical architecture. I'm thinking particularly of Paris, for example, where you have these wonderful, wonderful, magnificent, intricate, and obviously to every eye, works of art and beauty and creativity, versus something that is much more functionally simple. And there is value and aesthetics in simplicity also, there's no doubt about it. But I think if you compare the aesthetic value of different things, you may come to your own judgment about what is truly aesthetic. Yes, so one more question is coming from here.
If we think about, say, Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, and we don't know about his spirituality, but then whatever his discovery was, can we say that he was creative that way, or it's just a discovery? You know, like, we don't know if he was spiritual, like we don't know about his spirituality. So how do we say?
I thought the creator of Apple was God. Anyway, it's all right. I think it's difficult to judge, but I think anything which is, you see, our creativity is accessed through concentration.
Okay.
So if somebody comes up with a new and novel creative idea, I think it's very fair to say that it comes from an area of inspiration an inspiration, what we call superconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, if we look, for example, of the most outstanding inventive and creative ideas, which were not built on anything else, in other words, truly a novel discovery. Gravity is not a discovery. Gravity is something that is universally experienced from all time. Everybody knows about it. But the principles of it are still not understood. How a man like Einstein in the scientific world, managed to get some kind of inspiration, how a Beethoven got inspiration from 3 notes. These are the outstanding creative achievements. And maybe in the world of computer engineering, there may be such a thing as well. I'm not competent to judge it. But any subject where concentration is employed will yield its secrets. Concentration, this is called samyama, by the way, in yogic language, where we have these 3 components. We have concentration, meditation, and ultimately revelation or samadhi. When these 3 things are employed on any subject, their secrets get revealed. And so that means that there's no individuality to creativity and to discovery. It is just we became a good listener to what the universe has to offer, what was inherently there.
Again, 3 things: concentration,
meditation, that is sustained concentration as a flow. We may say a magnificent obsession. If we take the components of a genius, we find they never understood what they ate or drank. They never understood, what did I drink, what did I, in other words, a definition for concentration is the absence of a sense of time.
Okay.
And I'm not saying the absence of concentration, because sleep has that component, yes. But I'm saying it when we understand what concentration means, that we are taking our attention, directing it in a specific way, in a sustained and conscious way. And then when we have an absence of the sense of time, we know we have attained concentration.
This is for achieve something, is it, Swamiji?
For anything, for any activity, see. You find expressions, where did all the time go to?
Yeah.
If this question and answer session was absorbing and interesting to some, they may be surprised that over an hour has gone. See? But if their concentration wavered, they might be looking at their watches and saying, when will this session end?
Okay, I know.
All right, I think that's it for today. I hope this was valuable today. And of course, just to mention, we are open for business. So it's fortunate that we have one participant here. We used to, on Sunday mornings, have a number of people attending. Same thing with Tuesday nights and so on. And the advantage of coming to a holy place is to get the darshana. Finish off. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.